Welcome back, Red Spotters, to the show here on Red Spotlight Entertainment. I'm your host, Alexis J. Soto, and I'm joined by my wonderful friends. I think they're my friends. I have Peter Martinez, and I have Alexis Moreno. Peter seems to be giving me a weird as-if look. How are you doing, Peter?
Swell.
All right, Alexis, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
That's a good, honest answer. I think we're,
I don't think she's okay, so I don't know if that's honest.
Well, I think it was implied in there somewhere. What week are we in of the pandemic? Has anyone kept count?
What year?
Week. I said week.
No, I don't know.
Okay, well, I think
12,
that's it.
Maybe
12? Oh, fuck. Well, it's... We're about to enter month what? 4? I think. I think that's where we are. I don't know. Well, this week we have a wonderful review of the documentary film, the exclusive Shudder documentary film, Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror. This is a film that Peter Martinez recommended to us last week. And in keeping with, a lot of the wonderful African-American stories we've had last month, we're going to go ahead with that spirit. Alexis and I saw that film the last week, and we're going to have a full, in-depth review of it, as well as some other stories like AMC Theaters and Cinemark reversing their original stances on their mask, or I shall say probably they used to be not enforcing masks. There had a no mask policy, but of course they were shamed into reversing it. So we'll be discussing their original idiotic reasoning and of course their reversing of that. And we also have the Oscars, the Academy Awards, yet again promising more changes to include more diverse voices and more diverse films in their annual nominees. They've changed the number. They've officially said that there'll be 10 movies coming out every single year. As far as for Best Picture, which before it was up to 10, now is 10. So we'll be discussing what it means and what we think they could do or what they will do. And of course, we'll be discussing what the future of West Side Story is now that its lead star has been accused of some sexual misconduct or assault. So that's our wonderful set list for this week. But before we go into that on Red Spotlight, this is episode 240, by the way. So that's something. We'll round up and we'll talk about some of the media offerings that we've consumed this week, and we'll go ahead and start off with our wonderful Peter Martinez, our polite Peter Martinez. Peter, yes? What have you seen this week?
What have I seen? Let me think. Oh yes, okay. I'm on season 3 of Hannibal. It's pretty fucking great. I already talked about that. And I am currently watching Watchmen.
The HBO
series? Yes.
Okay.
I am not that far into it, but so far it's really good. It's really, really good. What's interesting with that is it really doesn't hold your hand. So if you've never read the original graphic novel, or at the very least seen the film, you are gonna be lost.
And that would be me. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know the novel. I don't know the movie. I know people love Zack Snyder's movie, and I know they also love this show. Mm-hmm. And in some of the circles that I follow, I think it was the Gold Derby awards analysts were mentioning it as one of their favorite shows of the last year and wondering if perhaps the Emmys would consider it for best miniseries of the year. Which, I mean, this show did get a lot of critical acclaim. I don't know. It seems like it doesn't matter what circle you come from. This was a universally loved show.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it got a lot. Like 90% of people loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Like really, really loved it. I think it's really well made. It's really inaccessible though, and that's what really surprised me. Like there's a lot of things, and even the first episode, where the only way you could really pick up on like these little things here and there, like it's just keywords and this and that, is if you had actually at the very least seen the movie, but definitely seen read the well, seen too, it's a graphic novel, but read the graphic novel, especially the graphic novel, I would say, because it more directly follows that than it does the film, especially because the film differs from in the third act from the graphic novel in a pretty important way that the show definitively, picks up from there. So yeah, I really am liking it so far. To tell you the truth, anything else I've seen? I rewatched Black Noir, but we're gonna talk about that. Oh, I don't know why I always forget to say this, but I watch it religiously every fucking week.
Oh my god.
90 Day Fiance. Currently watching Happily Ever After, because there's a question mark. Okay, see, there's 3, I think, main series.
Oh God, we're gonna do this. Okay.
There's 90 Day Fiance, and that's when they have them come over, their foreign fiance, and then they have 90 days because it's the K1 visa. If you're gonna get married, you can have a spouse from another country come over, but then you have 90 days to get married, or they have to go back. So the whole premise of the show is following couples in those 90 days. For a lot of them, this is like the first time they're meeting and seeing if the shit falls apart or if they go through with the wedding at the end of the 90 days. Then there's 90 Day Fiance before the 90 days. This is a separate one in which it follows them before they ever come to the country. It's like the prequel series, but with different cast members. Then you have 90 Day Fiance Happily Ever After, and there is a question mark in the title. That's why I say it like that. And the reason for that is that's for the cast members that have already been on 90 Day Fiance. Some of them got married, so you're following them. Some of them didn't, and now you're still following their plight in love. I said God damn it. It's really interesting. Also, Pillow Talk. Pillow Talk is a separate other series, which is other cast members watching the show and then commenting on it. That's why it's called Pillow Talk. It's like they're around the pillow watching the show, conversing with each other. Very funny. I think, was it today? Oh shit, I think I need to leave this recording. But they have another show, B90 Strikes Back, which is, I think it's just like mean, Jimmy Kimmel's mean tweet shit. I think it's just that. They're in quarantine, so it's very difficult for them to create new content. So I guess they're going with that. But yeah, it's a fucking ride. And let me put it this way. You guys know me. I don't like that kind of TV. I just don't.
Not only do you not like that kind of TV, you completely trash talk the rest of us for liking some particular programs of that kind of trash TV, I should say.
Yes.
For years on end.
Yes. And I stand by that. This is art. This is the definition of art, okay? This is maybe the most American show that there has ever been. Like, Oh, if you guys have seen the things that I have seen, okay, it is crazy the way a lot of these couples act, because again, it feels very distinctly American, because I feel like, not that we're the only country, but there's a very particular way in which Americans act, and I'll tell you this, it doesn't make us look good. But then a certain scenario for, how do I put this? The way a lot of people do try and come to America based on these visas. So like, there are some that come from, well, I'll put it this way. There's the Russian women who, a lot of them are, it's mostly scams. Mostly scams. But there's also, it works the other way, whereas with like, there's a lot of older women in America that go for the Nigerian men. Like there's a pattern, and you start to see like the patterns, and you start to see like how the process through which like becoming a US citizen through marriage works. And these things are real. Like these are real. Because there's a lot of other shit. Maybe especially Alexis probably likes, where it's like, this is just fake bullshit. I don't like this. But I don't know what to tell you. Like, 90 Day Fiance was made in a lab to be perfect trash. It's like perfect. I can't get enough. Yeah. That's my defense of 90 Day Fiance. That's what I've been watching. I haven't seen any movies in a while. How did I think about it? Or any new movies? Maybe I should try to get back to that.
Well, you have one coming up for next week.
Do I?
New documentary film.
Oh no! Oh, okay. Actually, no. There was something else. Just today, Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's a pretty chill dude. He hosts a live what's it called? Viewing. He hosted a live viewing of this film called The Revolutionist: The Life and Times of Eugene V. Debs, who was a labor union activist, an avowed socialist, a presidential candidate. He lived his life all about politics, basically, and pushing forward a better future. And the beginning, and this is all live, was Bernie, Danny Glover, who did the voiceover for the documentary. I think it's only about an hour or so long. It's not that long. It's very PBS style. You know what I mean? Those kinds of just very straightforward to the facts documentary about him. But they had a good discussion about him at the beginning. Then they saw it, and then afterwards they had a discussion. You know, everything had gone on. And I found it to be incredibly insightful and very passionate. It made me want to get up and, you know, go start a union somewhere. I don't know. It was great. And I had never heard of the man, Eugene V. Debs. And he actually was someone that I had heard before that Bernie Sanders had cited as a personal hero of his. And after seeing this documentary, I 100% get it. I understand why it is he views him as a hero, and it made me want to learn more about him. Yeah, I found that really insightful, and I think anyone that can check it out and learn more about him, it was really good. I really enjoyed it.
And speaking of Bernie, next week on this show, to commemorate America's birthday by crapping on it, we'll be talking about the documentary film of Bernie Blackout. The Revolution Will Not Be Televised is what it's called, because I want to. And I'm going to make these guys watch it because
Are you making
I'd like to.
Morena watch it too? Miss Morena?
She agreed. She signed the contract. she signed the non-disclosure agreement. So I mean, if we're gonna go there,
oh no,
it's there. We're doing it next week.
This man likes to revel in his sadness. This is.
Well, that's not necessarily exclusive to me. Alexis likes things that make her angry as well. Remember, Lincoln was a big film that made her angry.
Lincoln made
or
you
another
angry?
one of those movies. I think
Spotlight.
It was. Spotlight made her angry.
No.
That's right.
Yeah, that's definitely a film that would make you angry. I don't know. Those kinds of films, they're important, but I have to force myself to see that shit because I lived it. I lived it. It's like when you made me watch 11/9, Fahrenheit 11/9.
Fahrenheit 11/9.
And 5 minutes in, I just hated you more than anything because it really was just tearing open a wound that had recently been sealed and just like, oh yeah, reveling in it, pouring salt in there. And it's like, why are you doing this to us? But then I watched it and it's like, okay, yeah, whatever, fine. I guess I have to. With this one, I'm probably going to find it slightly more interesting because it is something where I personally feel that it happens, but I don't know if there's any hard data or evidence for, and what I'm referring to is Bernie blackout, which is the media basically not coordinating as one, but because Bernie is someone does not serve their interest, basically ensuring in the way that they cover him or don't cover him, just a bias against him.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is that's the documentary. It's examining how the media, the corporate media, treated this candidate in this campaign.
I mean, after he won Nevada, that MSNBC meltdown, that was pretty wild. I'm not gonna lie. One
anchor on there, Chris Matthews, compared Bernie Sanders' victory in Nevada to the Nazis invading France.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
Yeah, you're gonna watch that clip. They have that clip in that movie. You're gonna
If you want to make that claim, that's probably the clearest evidence you would have to try and make that
Except for Bernie
claim.
Sanders makes my skin crawl, because that's in there too.
Oh yeah, that one's bad.
You're
making me angry. Damn it.
We'll discuss this. We'll
watch
to
it.
commemorate the 4th of July next week. How about that? We'll have a review of that documentary film. I saw it. It killed me. It made me angry. So I thought I'd share the pain with you too. So that's what's going to happen. So moving on to what I've seen this week. Some of the same...
No.
Tron Legacy.
Oh,
Tron
was that
Legacy.
This week?
So
technically, yeah, that was this week.
Yeah, Tron Legacy, which this coming Friday, will be up on the To the Table feed with me and Peter. That was maybe one of the most divisive table recordings we've done, even though it wasn't a shouting match.
contentious.
No, it was like a very cordial disagreement on some things, which is rare for us because we usually want to kill each other whenever we disagree.
In your defense, I think you were dying, so you didn't have the strength to put up much of a defense.
Yeah, and I'm also very indecisive still because there are a lot of things you say about the movie that I actually agree with. I'm just not as hot on it. But in that, I've been watching Tron Uprising. I'm currently, I think, on episode 10 or 11.
Oh, you're pretty...
Oh, which you can see on Disney+. Yeah, I'm trying to get it out of the way.
Pretty indeed.
And so far, it's giving me a lot more to latch onto than either of the previous movies. So...
It's
a lot more.
Something?
No, it's good. It's in the positive.
We'll find out.
Peter had this idea that I would get my perfect revenge or something by saying that I would hate this show.
It would be his Rebels revenge.
Trump. Yeah, for that very horrid review years ago of Rebels season 3, because I was so excited for that day, and then little did I know that my friends were plotting against me. and that Peter had this review that he was going to completely trash the show.
It was my
and
personal opinion. There was no ill intent.
Really? There was no ill intent? The fact that there was no warning given in any which direction? Hey, Alexis, you're not going to like this. Hey, prepare yourself. Hey. I mean,
I thought
it could have at least been...
Because if I told you that, then you would just cancel the recording.
I'm not going to say I wouldn't do that, but... I mean, I don't know what I would have done.
In the work.
You could have trusted me.
I put in the work at that point. I was going to have my say. I was going to have my day in court.
And you had your say,
Yes.
but you could have been, a little bit more, I don't know, respectful to me and let me know that, hey, I'm going to kill the thing you love in front of your face, but fine, whatever. So yeah, I've been watching Tron Legacy, Tron Uprising, and I agree with Peter. It's a very fascinating, interesting world. And in the show, they explore a lot more of that I wish the films had the space to do. And there's something there in that property. There's actually a big something there. But we'll discuss that further into the table in our big series. So that's what I've been doing this week. Alexis, how are you with your, 20 seasons of Criminal Minds?
It's pretty good. I've watched a lot of the story arcs that I missed, and or either I didn't finish, so that's cool. Mark Hamill comes out in a couple of.
Is he a murderer?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
I just finished his arc. But yeah, I've been watching that. I have also been watching Hannibal, but I only saw the first episode because my dad's watching it and so is David. But it was really good. My dad, he was because he works at night, alone in the middle of nowhere, and he was watching it and he was I was scared.
It's a really good show.
Yeah.
And it gets better with each season.
I feel like that's like watching Contagion in the middle of a pandemic. I don't think that would do good for your mental health.
Yeah, it was funny because me and David were gonna watch it, but my mom doesn't like any of that stuff, so we were gonna leave the living room and watch it in his room.
Right.
And my dad was there, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go. And he's like, where are you guys going? And we told him, and he has to download the things from Netflix, the app to watch it on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And we as soon as we told him we were gonna watch that, he was like, oh, I want to watch it too. And I was like, okay. So yeah, we started watching that, and then I also started watching Watchmen.
Stop copying me.
I know.
Well, she's been watching Watchmen, haven't you?
No, I only saw the first episode.
Oh, but you liked it, right?
Yeah,
It's really
I
good.
liked it.
They touch on
it's
the
really
Tulsa.
Yeah,
race.
I didn't know it was gonna be the right off the bat. I didn't know it was gonna be based off of that. I've never seen the movies, never read the.
By the way, because Peter just mentioned it, isn't it hilarious how the week we have a rant on our show about public education, everyone on the internet's ranting about Juneteenth and the lack of education on that and the Tulsa massacre. We were pretty accurate on that. I feel.
Yeah. But yeah, it was funny because I was watching the documentary that we're gonna review today, and then my friend texted me and he's like, "Have you seen Watchmen?" And I was like, "No, I'm watching this, but I'm gonna watch it after it." And he was telling me you should kind of look into it if you haven't seen anything, because it might be a little confusing. But I didn't, and so I just watch it like that, and it's really good. But there is a lot of things that I have no clue what's going on.
Did you understand the squids?
No.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
But I mean, I don't know, that ending is just holy crap. Well, in both shows, in Hannibal and this one. But yeah, maybe I'll watch the second episodes next week. Both of those. And then what else did I watch? So I saw this thing on TikTok, and
Oh no.
By the way, do you know that Anthony Hopkins is on TikTok now?
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently.
But I watched this video of somebody posting something about Chelsea Handler.
Mm.
And she wasn't like interviewing, but she was like talking to people who like live in the South, and they pretty much were like denying slavery in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what the hell is this? So I looked it up, and there's like 2 things on Netflix that Chelsea Handler did, but which, by the way, I'm like not the biggest fan of her, but I just like wanted to see what these people had to say.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was so stupid. And so she has this documentary on there, which is, I forgot the name. It's something about white privilege. I saw the whole thing. The clip that I wanted to see was not in there. So I was kind of upset. It was an interesting documentary, but it was kind of weird. I don't know. I mean, I guess. So then I moved on to the show that she has, and it's called like Chelsea Does or something, and she just like does things. So there's an episode where she talks about racism, and she goes and like talks to like a whole bunch of people, and like in the description it says that she goes to a plantation and like talks to everybody there and stuff like that. And so that's the thing that I wanted to watch. It was interesting. She talks to people of all races. She went to Jerusalem because she's like Jewish, so I don't know what she was trying to do.
Well, the Jews were slaves.
Yeah. She went, like I said, she went to a plantation, and she talked to like Latinos and like all these like different people. But obviously, like when she got to the South, it was kind of
They were no longer slaves; they were prisoners with jobs.
Oh, it was so bad.
Oh my
like
God.
somebody. What did
Wait,
she
isn't that a
say?
line from Thor Ragnarok?
Yeah.
That's Jeff Goldblum. I'm sorry, the prisoners with jobs. That's right.
There was like a lady who was like getting offended by her asking questions about slavery, and like she had asked that lady, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about the South? And she was like, that we're like all hillbillies and like this and that. And she's like, what about like with slavery and stuff? And she's like, I think that people basically saying that it wasn't as bad as people might get out to be. That like some people might have hurt some of the slaves, but they were all a big family. Like those words literally came out of her mouth.
Let me
Did
respond
she talk
to
about
this person.
the War of
Hold
Northern
on.
Aggression?
Yeah, let me respond.
Oh yeah,
since
they
we
were
had
like it had nothing to do with slaves. It
Yeah.
was about our land.
Right. Yeah, sure. Fuck them. We had a big discussion last week about the War on Northern Aggression, like AKA the Civil War. And then, just today there was this video that I shared, this viral video that I shared about this woman holding a Confederate flag. Again, something we discussed in a big way last week at a Black Lives Matter protest, saying, "I will teach my grandkids to hate you all." I'm just glad somebody did what Peter said and just said the truth.
Yeah.
And how they feel.
Just say how you feel. It's easier to just kick you out of society. I've actually read an article. This was pretty interesting. Apparently, after the Confederacy fell, there was a good portion of them that escaped down to, I believe, Brazil. Or not escaped, but fled to Brazil. Because
Confederate leaders?
just individuals.
Oh, citizens. Okay.
And leaders. And they tried to establish the new South there because I believe slavery was still allowed. And
what the fuck?
yeah, it was weird. And I was reading this article. It was pretty interesting. And they even show a modern day picture of these brown people down in Brazil, but they're dressed all like the South, and they're waving around Confederate flags. And I guess there's still celebrations down there in certain parts to, quote unquote, honor their ancestors, which was the Confederate individuals that fled down there.
Oh no.
So I had, that's a little slice of history pie I'd never eaten before, but now I did, and it was interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, she's like not my favorite person, but the things that she shows and like, you know, the types of people that she interviews, it's interesting. Like she interviewed this guy who flat out said like he wants people of different races to live separately. And she was like, okay, so how would that work? Like, and like if there was a map, how would it work? And he was like, well, these people could live over here, and then these people could live over here. And then she was like, so it somehow turned into like them talking about Hitler, and like this is basically like what Hitler wanted. Like he wanted like the, I don't know, whatever it's called, like to be pure or whatever. And he was like, oh, come on, like that's not true. And she was like, no, it's true. It's been documented. You can watch his speeches. And he was like, I think that's all just war propaganda. It's crazy.
People really want their ethno states, and now they try to hide it by saying like, whoa, I don't hate brown or black people. I just think, you know, this whole intermingling experiment didn't work out. So, you know, they can go back to their countries. We'll stay, you know, I don't want to hurt anyone. You know, we'll just each be in our respective countries and our own culture. And they try to like really soften up, which is literally just Hitler speak. It's Nazism.
So bad.
It's, yeah, these people.
Neo-fascist, I think, is their...
There's so many words. They're all assholes. That's the word.
No,
and
it's really bad. Like, I mean, I feel like you guys would get just so mad, but like...
Oh, I'm sure.
it's like an interesting watch, I think. And like, it's just crazy. Like, when she was interviewing that family who was talking about like that slavery wasn't as bad or whatever, there was a black family there near them, and she was like talking to them, and she was like, how do you guys like feel about this? Like, that family over there basically just told me that like slavery was fine or whatever. Like, how do you guys feel like when people talk that way? And he was like, well, we've like come a long way, blah blah, because he like flirted with her in the beginning. He said that she was pretty. He was like before I wouldn't have been able to do that, but now I can. And she was like, it's insane.
He's just trying to get that action.
That is their view on progression, on how things have. It's crazy. But yeah, that's what I've been watching.
You know, speaking of you know, stuff we watched this week, there was this viral video that it's related to Black Lives Matter and the protests that are happening, and with Officer Karen, as people are calling her. I asked Moreno if she saw this video about the McNugget lady.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I saw that. I heard, or at least I got an idea of beforehand what this video would kind of be, and I really thought I saw the video, and at the end of it I'm like, that's it? Like, I was so shocked. I was beyond shocked.
I was waiting for like them to be rude to her.
I was waiting for anything to happen.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Oh my god.
We go ahead, Alexis, because wow.
I don't know what to say. It's like, you know, you don't want to like laugh at somebody having a mental breakdown because that's not cool. But on the other hand, I was laughing because I thought this was a joke. Like, I thought for like, I didn't think this was real. And then as she kept talking and talking and talking, I was like, oh. So this cop lady that's been around 15 years, she was complaining that because McDonald's made her wait. for a really long time, and they were delaying her breakfast order or something, and I guess people are drawing that because in recent weeks cops were publicly accusing Shake Shack of poisoning their food and giving them diarrhea. She must have thought that McDonald's was taking an extra long time because they were poisoning her food, and so she had been up for hours and hours and hours, and we're all tired and cranky when we get that way, so it's understandable from that perspective. But it really, I think, it was a lot of things. It was hilarious, it was sad, and revealing, I think, behind the mindset of a lot of people, and the fact that a lot of people, I think, have pretty accurately have asked the question. She doesn't seem that stable, and you give her a gun?
If you're holding a firearm and you have jurisdiction over every life you come in touch with while you're on the job, which is long hours, and
well, you should be mental,
your attitude
right?
Should be completely
your
different.
McMuffin being a little late just sets you off. Like that's
that's
bad.
right, the McMuffin. I'm sorry, not the McNuggets, the McMuffin.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Get it straight.
I should clarify
If it was
that.
the
I'm
big nugget,
sorry.
she would have held it together. But the McMuffin, that's where she knew America changed. Not the all-American McMuffin. But what's crazy to me is I saw it on Twitter. And, someone was maybe describing like, oh, this is so terrible. What's happening to our police officers? And it was about McDonald's. And I was like, okay, I assumed maybe someone spit in her food, or they said, fuck cops.
Yelling at her.
Or we're not going to serve you, you pig. Or like oinked at her. Or just something. Just something like rude. And then she's like, I can't believe I have to deal with this. Something along those lines. But it was literally just... They asked her to wait for her McMuffin.
Which is something that happens to every person that lives.
That's just a normal thing.
I told Alexis, I was like, I literally waited like 30 minutes for my coffee. Just my coffee.
It's crazy. And then she said, like, just don't bring me the McMuffin because I'm so scared right now. And it's like, if you were really scared, why did you even order from McDonald's in the first place? How do you know they didn't poison the coffee? They brought her the coffee. Like, what's your deal? It's so weird. It's so crazy.
I think it's just incredibly revealing, right? I think what's revealing about it is the privilege. This is you get to have a meltdown over something as trivial as this. Whereas for a whole subset of people in America, they can't even make it that far. They don't have the luxury of being able to complain about those things because they're far more worried about you gunning them down in the street. That's
what a lot of people said, like, dang, it must suck to always be paranoid and feel like you live in a country that hates you. That must suck, huh? Crazy. So crazy to me.
Yeah, that was...
It was funny. I'm not gonna lie. I laughed. I laughed a lot.
Yeah.
I genuinely
I was just very confused. Like, I didn't...
No, I was confused. That's what made me laugh, because it was so confusing. Because she sets it up. Like, she takes so long to set it up.
Yeah.
She's like, I just gotten off a long shift. I ordered ahead. Coffee, McMuffin, and hash brown. So I'm waiting out. Like, she sets it up. And then she gets to the end of the story.
She didn't need to mention all of that. I mean, she didn't need to mention any of it. And then, like, the fact that she was, like, afterwards, she, I guess, said something. I didn't read her statement or whatever, but she was like, we took it out of context. Like...
Well,
what was the context?
Well,
that she was having a mental breakdown.
Why did she record herself? Why did she record herself?
The fact that at the end she was like, just say thank you. I don't hear it enough. I'm like, what?
Yeah, sure. We're going to thank you. Yeah, for what? Killing people in broad daylight?
But that's also the thing. I doubt she personally has dealt with, like, people being rude and saying, like, F cops, like, to her face. Like, she probably, like most Americans, is seeing what's happening out in the streets right now and seeing the conversation.
Yeah. She's seen it in videos. But I highly doubt that she's seen it. Somebody said it to her.
I highly doubt she's dealing with that 24/7. Like, she can't even walk down the street without, someone doing something to her. I highly, highly doubt that. Because you know how I know that's not happening to her? Because she 100% would air that shit out loud to everyone. If she's willing to air out a late McMuffin, you don't think she's going to air out anything above that might happen to her? So she's obviously not dealing with that shit.
Also, I'd say this is also just a learning moment for everyone. If you don't record yourself,
if you're having
don't put it out in the internet.
Why would you record yourself and then put it on the internet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not, like, I agree with Alexis also, like what he said in the beginning. Like, I understand people having breakdowns, like
we got them weekly.
Yeah,
I get them weekly.
I get it, but it's like, it's not the time.
It's also incredibly tone deaf, right? Like, thinking that was gonna create sympathy for you in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protests all over the country. I mean, I have something here to add to this. I shared this graphic with you guys today about I think it was Morning Consult. The pollster released these numbers about whether or not the populace of this country supports the Black Lives Matter protests or if they support the police, and they broke it down by the different generations. So I have here the generations: the boomers, Gen X, which are our parents, millennials, that's us, and then Gen Z, which is the upcoming generation. So, and they broke it down, as I said, by generation. So I have here support Black Lives Matter. 81% of Gen Z support Black Lives Matter, and only 41% of Gen Z support the police. That's the biggest, I think, disparity between supporting the police and supporting Black Lives Matter. And that Gen Z clearly sees a distinction between that. Now with millennials, 70% of millennials support Black Lives Matter. Only 48% of millennials support the police. So we have two generations, the upcoming generations, less than half support the police here. That should say something. I also have Gen X. The trend is, with every generation that gets older, support for Black Lives Matter goes down and support for the police goes up, and that's what's happening here. Gen X, 62% support Black Lives Matter, 72% support the police. That shouldn't surprise anybody. And then with boomers, only 56% support Black Lives Matter, 77% support the police. So there we have it.
This just supports my argument that I've been making from the very beginning, is that the biggest divide in the United States is generational. I really do believe that, more so than race or income or where you live. It seems like when you break down the numbers, the biggest divide is generational. Which means it might take some time before real change starts happening. But it also gives me hope that it will happen.
It'll get there.
Yeah. Which is good.
Yeah. That hopefully that's in the direction that we're going. And we should also say, before we move on to the actual topics this week, we always want to talk about COVID and the update that has happened here. Just to talk about some figures. As of today, 120,000 people have now died from COVID-19 in the U.S. And the last week, there has been, as what Peter says, science is in now. And that is, a study came out that showed that if everyone wore a mask, COVID cases will go down 80%. And it's been fascinating to see how quickly that mindset has set in, because, we've been talking about our own local community on our podcast for weeks now, and we've been very critical. And it was weird how not just our own local community, but the neighboring communities of Arizona and Mexico all seemingly got on the same page about one thing, and that is, you have to wear a fucking mask. And also that coincided with the governor of California statewide mandating people wearing masks. So overall, that is good that happened. I'm just wondering, that probably should have come, I don't know, during week 1 of this pandemic, like a long ass time ago. And, we waited 4 months just to do the bare minimum, to, help prevent the pandemic. And that's where we are. So, and I think that's going to actually be a great, segue into our first official news story, which is AMC and Cinemark and the controversy that happened in the last week. Which is, they initially came out, I think it was AMC more so. Cinemark had said a few weeks back that they were not going to have a mask policy. But what happened in the last week is that AMC Theaters had basically come out with something, and it did not go over well. I'm going to read here what happened, right? So the original statement: AMC will not mandate that all guests wear masks. Although employees will be required to do so, nor will AMC perform temperature checks on customers, though it will monitor employees' temperatures and have them undergo screenings to check for signs of coronavirus. The situation will be different in states and cities that require residents to wear a mask when they're in public. But Aaron is the name you'll hear. He is the CEO of AMC, said that AMC was wary of wading into a public health issue that has become politicized. That's right, we're going here. And further, he says, "We did not want to be drawn into a political controversy," said Aaron. We thought it might be I can't even say that with a straight face. We thought it might be counterproductive if we forced mask wearing on those people who believe strongly that it's not necessary. We think that the vast majority of AMC guests will be wearing masks. When I go to an AMC feature, I will certainly be wearing a mask and leading by example. After that, those comments lit a fire on social media, and then in 24 hours, AMC completely reversed their position, not only saying that we're going to mandate that everybody wear a mask, but we're also going to have temperature checks for everyone that walks into the building, which only led for Regal to also reverse their earlier stance of not having any masks. Cinemark has not changed their policy. From what I'm aware of, they're still not mandating people wear masks in the movie theaters. I'm going to go to Peter because I feel he wants to explode. Peter.
I think this is completely reasonable. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, okay. Let's think about this. I hate Trump. Yeah, that's a good place to start. Trump sucks, and I think one of the biggest places in which we should start is his rally that he had. About 6,000 people showed up. Good numbers, Mr. Donald. But one of the things that he said, which is unbelievable, that he admitted to this, because there were reports about this, but he straight up admitted to this, was that when he had asked for them to slow down testing because he wanted to keep the numbers low, he intentionally made it so that less testing could be done because he didn't want high numbers, so it would look bad. He killed many, many, many people because of that. Many people. And he's the prime reason why we aren't already opened up again with like little spurts of, coronavirus here and there around the country, but it mostly being taken care of.
He's the primary reason why it was never contained, yes. And he's the primary reason why we didn't get masks or tests. Yeah, he delayed all those things months before it even came.
Crying about a second wave, like, bitch, we're still in the first wave. What are you talking about second wave? I saw a joke where it's like, there can't be any second wave if the first wave never ends.
Oh my God.
Which is basically the trajectory we're on right now. But yeah, the science is in. Wearing masks is vitally important. If literally everyone just wore a mask, this shit would drop dramatically as far as those that would get infected. So it's a no-brainer. If you're going to open up movie theaters, which I don't think they should, but if you're going to do it, masks are a must. It's a no-brainer. And the fact that, and this is another reason why you positively hate Trump and his people, basic health concerns is now political. They turned masks into a political statement. You know how stupid we look like to the rest of the world? It's like turning toothpaste into a political statement. You can't recommend to me that 9 out of 10 dentists say that I should use this toothpaste. Fuck you, freedom, rah rah, and then shoot a shotgun into the air. Like, we look like idiots, massive idiots, and more people will die if you don't wear the mask. So the fact that the CEO was such a fucking coward, and this whole idea of like, well, if we don't require masks, we're not getting political. Like, the fact that you did not require masks made it political. Requiring masks is not political. Scientific facts should not be quote unquote political. So the fact that people bullied their dumbasses into changing it is really good. That's the kind of bullying I like to see. That's why I hate when people say end all bullying. No, some bullying works. And it's necessary. Some people need to get bullied, and AMC absolutely need to get bullied, and they changed their criteria, and that's a good thing. So that's where I'm at on it.
Alexis, what did you think when you read these statements?
You thought, oh boy, Tenet, here I come.
It's just, yeah, like, this whole thing of don't want to make it political, but it's like, then don't make it just keep people safe. Like, it doesn't have to be, it's so stupid, and you honestly just kind of don't even know what to say because it's so stupid.
Yeah,
it's just like your brain just kind of
yeah, I feel like my brain just fries itself at least a couple times a day by what I read.
Like, imagine Trump supporters just going, like, making viral videos, cutting off, using scissors to cut off their seatbelts and saying, fuck you. You can't make a law to force me to wear a seatbelt. It's my freedom not to wear a seatbelt. How dare you? And they pride themselves in not wearing a seatbelt. How do you respond to that? All I can think is, you dumb. I don't know. These people are beyond words.
If it wasn't already made obvious, I think Peter is right. This is, I think, just a true power that the political right has. The right wing, I should say, clarify in case people say that they're right. No, the right wing in this country. They're able to completely twist and hijack any conversation, and they're kind of like suicide bombers, right? Where just by making a political issue out of a stupid thing can ruin it for everybody else. Because that was the logic that AMC was using here, is that, because these group of crazy people think that masks is a political issue, we don't want to offend them. We don't want to lose their business. So we're going to placate to them. We're going to cater to them. And we're going to make them feel at home by not making them wear masks. And we feel like it is now a legitimate political issue. So we're not going to wade into it. But you idiot, it's weird because they're trying to say we're not going to take a stance. But you take a stance by not enforcing masks being worn because it is a public health concern. And this, I feel, is the danger of the right wing in this country, of the alt-right, is they take something like a public health issue and they make it a quote-unquote political issue, even though, it's not a political issue. But they twist everything and they put the rest of us in danger. It's not difficult to wear a mask. I, for the first time in months, broke social distancing this last week. I had a doctor's appointment. I wore a mask. they had social distancing. It was, by the way, this practice is one that I completely trust, because the physicians there are the head physicians of the whole county. And I've been going there for years, and they had a whole wonderful system where they only had, like, I think 4 people in the waiting area. And then they had, people waiting in their cars outside. They had lines, so 6 feet apart. So they had everyone wear a mask. So it was all fine and everything. But it's not that difficult to wear a mask. It really isn't. And
it's about freedom.
And furthermore to this issue about, I know we're past this to a certain extent, but when I see people about, like, well, it's difficult to have, like, something on your face and you're trying to eat popcorn, or when someone says, well, it's difficult if I want to go to Disney World, but it's like 90 degrees outside and it makes it so uncomfortable. Don't fucking go, number one. And as far as, like, the complaints by the companies, don't fucking open. This is what I keep saying to, like, people. The businesses and the public are so desperate to have normalcy come back, but you're not going to get it back. And the next best thing is half rate and a ripoff. Not only to, like, your bottom line, which is your wallet, but your own health and the health of those around you. None of this makes any sense. And so, yeah, they were shamed, and of course they're now, I mean, it's this was an embarrassment, and this was also a disaster. I think it was Matt Donato. It was one of the people who was one of those reporters for film journalism. He said that he had this theory that the reason why, mainly, AMC didn't want to enforce the masks was that they were afraid that it would deter people from even buying concessions, which is, of course, where movie theaters make their real money.
Yeah, that's basically where they get all their money from.
Mm-hmm. So why open? I mean, yeah. But also from a different perspective, considering that since, like, all of Hollywood is, like, rallying around in kumbaya, hand in hand and everything, like, racing toward July 31st or July 15th or whatever as the grand reopening of movies and movie-going experience in America. This is a terrible PR nightmare. It's not going well already. And it's not gonna get any better. It really isn't. Because even though we did say, like, if everyone wears a mask and, COVID goes down 80%, again, in certain situations, that doesn't help. And I believe, I think I shared it with you guys. I think Peter saw it as well. There was this graphic that Yahoo News released about the different tiers of the level of which you risk yourself getting COVID. And the top of that tier was, I think, basketball. But movie theaters are actually at the level 6 level of danger,
mm-hmm.
which is pretty high. 6 out of 9.
Pretty high.
Yeah.
The lowest was, like, takeout and tennis.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Everyone start learning tennis.
Yeah. But also, we all know this, and it's seated deep underneath all these layers, but it also just exposes, once again, you don't trust corporations. Because, as we keep trying to say to a friend of ours, who I won't say, Peter and I keep trying to, like, convince a friend of ours that, wants to insist on the benevolence of corporations and CEOs. This is an example that they don't give a fuck about you. They only give a fuck about your wallet. And if it means them risking your life to get your money out of your wallet, they'll do it. This was the example of that. Right then and there. So, yeah. I'm not going to a theater anytime soon. So, we'll see how they go. I don't have much hope it's going to be promising at any level. Any other comments on this? No? Okay. Let's move on to the Oscars. So in the last
Oscars so
2
white.
weeks, right? In the last 2 weeks, the Academy announced that they were going to now for sure nominate 10 movies for Best Picture a year, whereas before it would be 8 or 9 or up to 10 because of some bullshit rules. So I have this from the announcement. Starting with the 94th Oscar season, the Academy will implement a quarterly viewing process through the Academy screening room, which is that's their version of Netflix or Disney Plus, where they have all the movies on there for them to view. The streaming site through which the Academy members are able to watch Oscar hopefuls at home. By making it possible for members to view films released year-round, the Academy aims to broaden each film's exposure, level the playing field, and ensure all eligible films can be seen by voting members. So this suggests a couple of things. This suggests that at least they're aware that people understand that the Academy doesn't watch any movies at all, if they watch anything. And so this seems to be an attempt.
It's all about
to
status.
Right. This seems to be an attempt to change the image. I don't believe them when they say they're going to change the rules to make their own members, because based on we had a whole bunch of shows over the years and a lot of reports that we've read, and Academy members are very stubborn, and I don't think whatever they do is going to change that reality. So that's one aspect of what they say is going to be implemented. Of course, this language is very vague. They don't really say how they're going to enforce and make sure that everybody watches the damn movies. So that tells me they're not going to do that, first and foremost. And then second of all was this very vague promise about, so this was, all of this was really to address the lack of diversity in the nominees, in the films that the Oscar nominates. And so they're trying to look as if they're going to watch all the movies that are out there, so that they can now nominate more diverse films than they otherwise would have. Again, the mechanics by which they're going to do that are not there at all. So it's all kind of vague. Yeah. My take is, this is all poking in the direction of which we need to go and reform a lot of this institution. I am not at all convinced that this is going to work in the short term, although it seems to me, and I'm just trying to read between the lines, and you guys call me out if I'm being a little bit presumptuous here, but the fact that they're saying that they're going to for sure nominate 10 movies a year, it almost kind of seemed to me as if they were trying to say, we're going to have 10 movies now. That way we have a 10th safeguard spot in case we forget to nominate a diverse film. And that 10th slot will be for whatever movie didn't make it in or whatever, in case we make some big mistake. And that they could use that as a tool to make them look better. Although, of course, I'm of the mind that they don't actually mean to get better, but they want to look better. Thoughts?
No, yeah. I mean, they've tried this before, and we literally went back to having only one person of color be nominated this year for the Oscars. So, I mean, I hope they mean what they're saying, but as we've seen before, you can't really trust what they say, so.
Yeah.
Yeah? No more discussion needed? We're all on the same page?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it, right? Is kind of the response by this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a rough couple of years for them. I mean, and of course, a lot of this was sparked by the Black Lives Matter protests. But, as Peter said, Oscars So White happened years ago at this point, and there still hasn't been much of any progress.
We have a really good video
seen.
Discussing the issue.
Red Spotlight doesn't do videos, Peter.
Oh.
So I think you're mistaken there.
Oh, okay.
So with that, we'll now move on to our next story, which is related to this film. Whatever, I don't even know what it's related to. It's yeah. So we all know that there is a film that was supposed to be coming out. I don't know if it is anymore. It was a remake of West Side Story that was was directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Tony Kushner, and starring Ansel Elgort and others. So I did mention that Ansel Elgort was accused of sexual assault. We're not gonna linger at all on those details. That's not really of interest. I mean, however that resolves itself, it'll resolve itself, but that's not the point of what we're going to be discussing. Of course, we do support women and we support Me Too, unlike the Democratic Party and Joe Biden. Anyway, in regards to West Side Story, there has been no comment by Disney or by the director about what's going to happen. I don't think any of us has the slightest idea what's going to happen with this. I guess my question, and I'm going to ask Peter a question, then he'll probably say some kind of a crude joke or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll get to the actual answer. But it's a serious question. Like, if you're the studio and the director, and this is going to be a thing that's going to continue to happen in the years to come to other projects because of Me Too and everything. And remember, we covered All the Money in the World a few years back with Ridley Scott having to replace Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer. What do you do, especially in this case, when Ansel Elgort was your lead actor in the movie? What happens?
Nothing. Nothing's going to happen. They're going to release the film, people are going to go watch it, and then that's going to be it. Well, I don't know about the people go and watch it thing, but they're going to release the film.
I think it's more likely for it to come out in a different way than in the theater.
If they paid a lot of money for it, then they think they can make money off of it.
It's unfortunate, but yeah, nothing's really gonna happen.
Well, it's really unfair to everyone else involved.
Oh, yeah.
This movie is just ruined. It is.
Maybe
no one's gonna want to look as to support this movie. I guess, Mike. Let me redirect the question, Peter. Let me ask you, for example, if this was your movie,
mm-hmm.
what would you do? What would you seek to do to remedy the situation? What can you do?
I would seek not to do a remake of West Side Story. That's the first part. Second part, there's nothing you can really do. If the movie's done, and I'd imagine you're not going to get the money to go back and all that huge sets and choreography and dancing. It's not like
especially right now.
Yeah, the movie's done. Either you shelve it, but you can't shelve it because it's a big movie that from a big director that you were hoping was going to make you some money. It's going to get released. I just don't know what else you can do with it. Maybe it's not that big and they can hit it, send it to streaming. But if you have like a juggernaut like Steven Spielberg who says, fuck you, my movie's going in theaters, then it's probably going to theaters. That's where I would bet it goes. And you'll have some people push back on it, but for the most part, not much.
So it just seems as if the best case scenario is the movie comes out, it makes whatever money it can, but people are just going to not talk about it.
I'm not saying it that's the best case scenario. I'm just saying that's what's going to happen. I don't think there is a best case scenario at this point. But I just think, yeah, I'm not moralizing it in any way. I'm just saying that's what I think is going to happen.
I got to be honest. If I were directing this movie, I would probably tell Disney, do whatever you want to it. I'm done. I'm out.
You say
I'm
that,
like, look,
but if you like spend every waking moment of 2 years of your life pouring your heart and soul into the film, you're gonna feel different.
No, I mean, yes, I say that, and I probably would feel different, but at the same time, it's like the movie's nuked. I feel like no one's going to be talking about, this was nice, or the costumes, or the music, or like the direction. They're all going to be talking about Ansel Elgort, and it's like I mean, it just sucks. It really just sucks for everyone involved in this movie, and it's, I don't know, it's just so incredibly disappointing. Because now it feels shitty to make an event out of it, because it would be supporting an individual who's been accused of sexual assault, but then again, that's a presidential candidate right now that a lot of us are supporting, so, you know?
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, a lot of the credits aren't one person long. They're many, many people long.
Of course, yeah.
So
the costume designers, the writers, and of course all the crew, like there's a lot of people that worked on that movie, and now it's kind of like it was for nothing.
Well, that's why I'm saying,
because of one person.
There's no good way to go about it. I just genuinely think that's what's going to happen at the end of the day. But I don't think there's like, well, this is the right thing to do. I don't know if that exists in this scenario. And if it does, I just don't know what it would be.
Yeah. In a perfect world, in a perfect situation, yeah, I'd probably look to just start from scratch. Because it make the movie. In the perfect world, people wouldn't be sexual assaulters. So there's that.
True.
Which is more important than criticizing a remake of a movie for whatever, weird reason you seem to have. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our review, which is Horror Noire. Peter, take this one away.
Where should I take it?
To us.
Okay. This is a film exclusive to Shudder, which I kindly provided for these fine gentlemen and gentle ladies. Horror Noire, A History of Black Horror, directed by Xavier Bergen. The untold history of Black Americans in Hollywood through their connection to the horror genre, delving into a century of genre films that by turns utilized, caricatured, exploited, sidelined, and finally embraced them. Robin Means Coleman's seminal book presents the living and the dead, using new and archival interviews from scholars and creators. Yeah, so this is a really good film. This is probably the first thing I saw on Shudder, and I had heard about it, and it was one of the main reasons why I'd wanted to get that streaming service. And I think it does such an amazing job of delving into the history of Black people in America and their connection, not only to Hollywood, but specifically the horror genre, like I just described. And I'm really happy you guys got to see it. So what did you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for both of us. We were really happy to see this, and I think
mansplaining.
Oh my god. No, I'm really happy that I got to see it too. So listen to him.
Alexis, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I learned a lot of information that I hadn't already known. In particular, because it does involve the history of a genre that I'm very, very not knowledgeable of at all. A very limited experience with. And so it helped, I think, as, I've always liked to think of myself as a student of history and a student of film, to learn more about, and especially a genre that in many ways is often dismissed, overlooked, and downplayed. As being, its place in the overall, annals of cinema, if you will. But it is much more interesting in that it's also tying in the history of the horror genre with the history of African Americans in this country. And I think one of the opening lines of the doc kind of says it all, where one of the people says, the history of the genre of horror is the history of black horror in America.
Black history is black horror.
Right.
I just want to show you guys. I took
notes.
Oh, fuck. We're in for this, baby. Okay.
I took a bit of notes, so yeah.
Yeah. But I think we're all of the mind, and I'm going to, I can't speak for Alexis, I guess. Never mind. But I am of the mind.
He's learning.
Mind that
misogynists can change.
You are a piece of shit, Peter. I'm not a... You're the one that really, we're saying to Alexis that she speaks for all women for, trying to invoke her and Greece and everything a couple weeks back. So that was a bit sexist.
Greece? Wait, oh, okay. I thought you were talking...
You asked Alexis a very sexist question about why is it that all women like Greece? And you asked her to speak on behalf of all of them.
The country or the...
No.
Greece with a C.
If you don't have Shudder, get a subscription, watch this documentary. If I would just think if you're teaching a film class, I think this is a very, very good documentary for students. You learn so much. There are movies that I've never even heard of. So for one, that was entertaining, but also very much, I think, important to be aware of.
There are movies I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
Alexis?
No, yeah, I agree. I did learn a lot. It's very interesting to see the way that they used this genre, both black people and white people, to kind of show their views on actual horrors that are happening in the real world. So it was interesting.
That's kind of the main reasons why I love horror films so much. I feel like all horror films derive from real life and real horrors that that affect us every day. Speaking of not the kindest of people towards women, The Invisible Man. The last movie, I believe, at least me and Alexis saw in a movie theater.
The last one we will watch for quite a long time.
Yeah.
The last movie of 2020 in March. It was very much preyed on the fears of what many women feel like, or what many women feel when they're in a very abusive relationship. And I feel that the best horror does that when you go down the line of a lot of the truly great horror films, and the way it preys on very real world fears, no matter how outlandish or supernatural or goofy it gets.
The idea is still there
at the heart of it.
And yeah.
Can I get into some of my notes?
Of course, yes. Go ahead. We all liked it, so let's get into this.
You can tell I haven't been in a class for a while, because I just started taking notes on my own.
Oh my God.
Well, I thought it was really interesting that they started with D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. And that was really the first film epic really ever made. And if you don't know about it, it's literally just The Klan is Awesome, the movie. it's racist as shit.
That's so important to to kind of highlight, right? In many ways, it could be the first horror movie. The Birth of a Nation was screened at the White House. It was
Woodrow
a different
Wilson.
time. Yeah,
He
very different
fully
time in
endorsed
America.
it. But
Yeah,
when you're pulling it back to this idea of fear, a lot of people within the United States weren't around black people. Like, think about us. We live in a place that's 90% Mexican, right? But we have cars, so we can easily drive to different areas. We can move all around the world. We have the internet. We have phones. But at that time, people weren't nearly as connected as they are today. So if you have preconceptions about certain people, they were rarely ever challenged, face to face. So for a lot of people, they had fears of black people, a lot of white people across the country at that time, and then they were simply reinforced by this film. That fear was played on within this film, and it was endorsed by the literal president of the United States. Right? So the fact that it is sort of the first film that played with the idea of horror in these films is true. And where black people fit into this equation at the starting point is they are the horror. They are the thing to be feared. Which is...
And in case it wasn't noticed real quick... Yeah, you're right. In case it wasn't mentioned, The Birth of a Nation is very early on in the history of movies and movie making. Like, this is almost at the very beginning that movies are a thing.
It's a silent
movie,
film.
yeah.
Yeah.
Black and white silent film.
Yeah. It didn't come out in 1981 or some shit like that. No, shit's old. But it also... I don't know if it started, but it started it on the big screen, I would say. This perpetuated stereotype of the black man that lusts over the white woman.
Yeah.
And it really drives home this unbelievably racist narrative of, the black individual is the monster, and they're after, our poor defenseless white women, and we need to protect them, and da-da-da. Like, just the most racist of the most vile racist shit. For me, though, I knew that film existed, but I never thought to think of it in that lens. So when they're really breaking it down that way, I'm like, wow, like, yeah. Preach. Yeah, true. Facts. Hashtag.
Well, actually, it's funny because, I think Alex, you saw it too, but watching Malcolm X, they mention it in the beginning.
Yeah.
And they criticize the crap out of it, obviously, and stuff. And he doesn't say it to, like, towards where it's like a horror film, but in a way he kind of does, because it's like they're putting them as the villain.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I mean, it speaks to what, in many ways, what was on film, not the stereotypes or the depictions of African Americans themselves, but how America viewed African Americans. That was the realist thing that was captured through the lens. That's what people thought they were, and they were portrayed as evil villains that needed to be vanquished. And almost exclusively for the very first few films. So the Birth of the Nation is the one that, kind of exploded that. But I think, from a broad thing, and Peter, you're gonna talk about the specific situations here, but from just a broad perspective of this documentary, was as America changed and as certain norms were beginning to, replace others, as attitudes were shifting somewhat slowly, certain tropes and certain depictions were outdated, and so certain racist, shall we say, depictions were outdated, and they were replaced by newer ones that essentially continue the long line of horrific depictions of African Americans in films.
That's what I really like about this documentary is it starts at the beginning and it shows you the evolution, you know, over time of like, this is where we started. You know, you go from at one point being literally the villain, the horror, to, you know, you're not the villain, you just die off first. But I kind of want to go down the line.
Right, sure. We'll go through this journey with you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. After that was, of course, the Great Depression. You know, the 30s and 40s, and you know what sold really well in the 30s and 40s? Horror films. That's when the Universal classics blew up. Horror films were a big commodity, and I think it's because people had so much to fear of in their real life. To go to the theater.
It's kind of like us.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Season 3 of Hannibal, baby. I'm there.
Oh my God.
It's kind of funny.
So yeah, just sort of being afraid of something silly for a while pulls you away from your real fears to a certain extent. Yeah, I understand why horror films blow up in times of crisis. But at this time, it was a lot of, you know, old manors and creepy houses and shit like that. So black people, they would play maids and, you know, chauffeurs or doormen. You know, they were
the hell.
That was basically their role in horror films at that time. And that was it. Because during the 50s and early 60s, it went from that sort of supernatural monster horror to more scientific aliens, atomic abominations, more science fiction horror, basically. And you don't need a black man to be a scientist in the 1950s, or at the very least, you won't allow it. So from the 1950s to the early, or most of the 1960s, black people actually were probably less represented in horror films than they were in the 1930s and 1940s. Whether that's better or worse, I don't know. You decide. So yeah, and the first time that they really start to become part of the genre again is George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, 1968.
Right.
Have you guys seen this film before?
I have seen bits and pieces. I did watch the ending, but like not all of it together.
Yeah, I know, Alexis, you haven't. I asked just to get the no.
I felt it was pretty obvious, but
yeah. But I want to hear it. I want those words to leave those lips. What is pretty cool, to me at least, is my grandpa. He collects a lot of old newspapers, and he was showing me some shit. I don't remember, but I was going through the old newspaper, and it was, I don't know if it was for the drive-in, but it showed like Night of the Living Dead, like when it first came out. In the newspaper showing that it was showing.
That's cool.
And then like some other movies and And I was like, oh shit, that's cool. He probably still has it somewhere because I had seen it a long time ago and I was like, oh wow, this newspaper's pretty old. 1968. Yeah. But what really changed with that is the lead protagonist was black, played by Dwayne Jones. And, you know, he was big, he was strong, good-looking dude. He was the smart, level-headed one that tried to keep everything together. He really was the hero. And, you know, as the story goes, George Romero, he inadvertently made a pretty politically charged film. You know, to him, he was like, the dude showed up. He was the best to the casting call, so I hired him. But inadvertently,
Which, by the way, that in and of itself is how things should be. But it wasn't at all
in a perfect world.
Right.
I had a question because I don't know if they mentioned it. Before this movie, was there any other movie that had a lead black person? Like
at all?
At all, yeah.
There has to have been one. At least one.
It's a difficult question to answer. There had to, you'd think.
Yeah.
But I think what you could say about Night of the Living Dead is that it was, at least at that point, the most prominent.
What was different about Night of the Living Dead is, and again,
they showed him as human. And
George,
not anything.
Not only that, but George Romero, I think, kind of stumbled into this, but that's why art isn't always, made from intent. It's sometimes made from circumstance. Is a lot of the footage that they show of the world collapsing is very similar to, race riots that were happening at that time. For the fight of civil justice. It shows, again, the lead protagonist killing a lot of white people on screen. Like, he literally smacks a white dude down and he's like, bitch, I'm in charge, deal with that shit. And there is, especially for this time, and the reason why it played so much on Black Fear is you saw this this black guy succeeding throughout the film, as he's in this terrible place of horror, but he's fighting back. And then at the end, there's this catharsis, like, oh, he survived the night. Oh, I'm going to spoil the movie for you guys. But this posse that's going around, rounding up, the zombies and just shooting them off in the head and then burning them. They mistake him for a zombie and kill him. Shoot him in the head and then throw him on the pile with all the other bodies and burn him. And inadvertently, it really does create a parallel to this idea of, lynch mobs that existed at the time. And a lot of the real fears that black individuals had to go through then and unfortunately go through now. And I think they even had said that there is a story that George Romero heard about the assassination of Dr. King while, driving the reels of the film in the back of his car to somewhere. Like, it's kind of, it really was a film of the time and ahead of its time at the same time.
What I found really striking in Night of the Living Dead was that Romero, and it had to have been intentional, I feel, although it couldn't have been, maybe, I don't know, remind me here, but seemingly there was imagery lifted from real live riots into the film with police officers and dogs going after some of the zombies.
I'm not 100%. I'm not gonna say that I know, but the imagery is striking, like genuinely striking.
Well, actually,
I feel like it has to be, because I don't think that they would do that voluntarily, especially at that time.
Now that I'm aware of, I remember, okay, so the riots, those particular riots happened when Kennedy was still alive and president. And if this is 1968, this is the year Nixon wins. So this had been a few years before this then. Mm-hmm. The imagery was well aware of.
Mm-hmm. It was prescient.
Yes.
But that, because it was 1968, that directly leads us into the 70s, which, and this time I'm not doing this, for shits and giggles, Alexis, because you do know this. This is the era of blaxploitation, which is, slang for, or not slang, but a combination of the word black and exploitation, where it's basically just a whole subgenre of film made exclusively for black audiences. And
right.
I know you know about that because one of the best people in blaxploitation, we saw a documentary on it. You know, Dolomite is My Name, which, you know, deals with that whole subgenre. Which,
documentary?
Not documentary. Film.
Yeah, the drama film. Dolomite is My Name.
Mhm.
On Netflix. Catch it now. It's good.
It's really good. It's really, really good. But yeah, in the 70s, of course, brought with it Blackula, which would be the best name for a film ever, but its sequel's name is Scream, Blackula Scream, which is, it's quite a film. But yeah, blaxploitation is such an interesting genre. And they show a little bit of Blackula within, you know, the documentary. And it really was about feeling powerful, like just a level of empowerment for the black population they hadn't had at that time. Again, it was half good and half bad, and they talk about this.
Yeah, it's a storied. It's very mixed in terms of, you know, because I mean it's doing two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, for the first time in decades, not only is it finally showing black people on the screen again, but it's an abundance. It's almost a commodity, shall we say, a whole genre of films that are successful to the audience. And so, on one hand, black people are getting roles. They're having successes in this business, but at a cost. And the cost is it's reinforcing negative stereotypes.
Yeah, and of course, sexist stereotypes. Like most heroes are, you know, are pimps, you know, badass pimps that come in with, you know, with the fur and the hats. And that's where a lot of those stereotypes, I believe, really blew up. Blaxploitation, it seems, was a double-edged sword as far as representation. But there is, in the area of horror with Blackula itself, there is a lot of interesting shit going on there. Like there's the scene where Blackula is, you know, arguing, trying to end the slave trade. There's a great quote where he says, you know, a man has got to be able to see his face. And, you know, he's talking to another black person who turned into a vampire, now can't see themselves in the mirror. And in the film, they sort of extract that to, you know, black people themselves and cinema. You know, it's a powerful thing to see your own face on the big screen.
So you're saying, Peter, that they put politics in the movie?
Yeah, that's probably why the film sucked, because they inserted politics. Right. They shouldn't have done that.
I never heard of a movie inserting the politics of the time.
No, SJW politics, how dare they? How dare they? But also, Blackula was the first sexy vampire. he is true. Up until that point, you know, there was no sexy vampire.
Blackula walked so Twilight could run.
Don't you dare disrespect the name of Blackula like that. How dare you? No, I refuse. Oh, how dare you?
Was that a nerve?
That was a nerve. So that's basically what goes on in the 70s. And then by the 80s, the 80s really was... It was very much this whole... How do you put this? Suburbia. You know, that was sort of the height of suburbia and the evils encroaching onto suburbia. Because of that, black people sort of got relegated to the one friend in the corner that is going to go ahead and die within the first 5 minutes of the film. That's basically where black people were at when it came to 80s horror. You were there, you were friends, maybe, and that's where a lot of the tropes, I think, for black people come from. So you have the token character that only exists, for the white character. You have and these are the official terms, the sacrificial Negro, which exists only to put themselves in danger to protect the white lead character, the magical Negro, which is the wise black character that exists only to help the white character. And of course this was the Reagan era. So black people were realistically seen more as the enemy or as like a drain on the economy. So, they might be portrayed as gangsters, they might be portrayed and they put it this way as, you have a black man and through their eyes at that time, oh, the black man is scary. So if the horror monster kills the black man, then that proves how scary, that horror monster is at that time. So you technically see black characters come out in a lot of different roles, but they're never characters. They're never seen as characters. They are always there to serve the white protagonist and whatever that may be. Can you guys maybe think of some films where that happens?
One of the... I think they maybe spend a few seconds talking about this, but, just stepping back from horror and looking at all movies, especially mainstream movies of the 80s, there weren't very many black faces as far as those big, mainstream hits in the 80s. I mean, just think back to films like The Goonies.
They had an Asian character. You can only have one minority token at a time.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Too many, and it's
like the 80s seemed to be almost kind of a regression in terms of like the number of black faces, shall we say, being put on the screen for mainstream audiences.
It's weird, right? Because where you had a blaxploitation, which is, black faces everywhere in a celebration of black people, it was never particularly mainstream. Whereas with the 80s, you started to see black faces in mainstream films, but they were relegated to certain supporting roles. So it's again, that sort of double-edged sword. It's a form of progress, but it's also a form of regression at the same time. Because instead of being relegated to this niche that only the black community consumes, now you do see black faces in the mainstream, but they're never going to be the hero. And if they survive to the end, wow, is that a miracle?
It kind of seems like they went, okay, they have like this whole like genre of movies. I mean, it may be a little bad for me to say this, but it kind of feels like they went, oh, they feel a little bit too like powerful. Let's give them this, that way this stops, type of thing.
You mean like give them scraps within the main film to collapse their more thriving blaxploitation films? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Honestly, maybe. It's. I think it came from. As we progressed, we obviously started to intermingle more. Whereas the 60s and 70s, it very much, separated two worlds. And through the 80s and 90s, where you start to become more and more of one world.
Well, we know that the world changed. I mean, remember, it wasn't until the late 70s that the Supreme Court ruled that interracial marriage is law.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what happened was because, white people controlled, the mainstream at that time. This time too, probably. Entertainment and the likes. Now that black people were starting to, and white people were starting to intermingle more, it's like, okay, so you start to see more black faces pop up in more mainstream films, including horror. But, we're not there yet. So there's still just going to be I voodoo lady that helps the white character figure out how to defeat Chucky.
How to reach the top
yeah,
of the
yeah.
mountain.
That kind of shit. Are you talking about holes?
Yeah.
And that was 2003, so I mean that should tell you a lot. Or they get roles where they're basically just the friend, and they're there to say, "Are you okay?"
Yeah. I forgot the actress's name, but like it's so true. She was talking about how like every role she auditioned for and got, it was always the best friend character that's like, "Oh, are you okay?" Like she said, I had to practice 50 million different ways of saying the same line for all these different projects. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, white main character? Is there anything I can do? I'll sacrifice myself for you halfway through the film. The audience won't remember my name. That's basically what was going on. Where was I? Let me look. Oh, 90s horror. We reached the 90s, guys. We're almost there. And the 90s, and they talk about, was actually a really good time. This is where black media started to explode more. And you started to get that's where, Spike Lee jumped on the scene. That's where you got
Malcolm X.
Yeah, Boys in the Hood. You started to get black films made by black actors, smaller films and different voices, started to become a mainstay. And for the most part, the horror genre as a whole really suffered in the 90s. There's not many classic 90s horror films. Can any of you think of one? Yeah. 90s wasn't the best time for horror, but it did bring about one of the best horror films I feel ever made with Candyman. And Candyman, man, was that just on the nose about what it was tackling. Candyman is one of the great slashers, supernatural slasher, who was a former I think, was he a former slave? Or he was a black individual at that time who was a painter.
He was lynched. He was lynched. Right? Yeah, so he was a painter.
Wasn't he a free?
Yeah, I think he was freed.
Slave?
But he was a painter, and he was painting a white woman. They fell in love. People didn't like the interracial relationship. So they lynched him. They got him, cut off his hand, put a hook on instead, slathered him, I think it was in honey, and let the bees at him. And that's why there's always like this whole bee aesthetic with him. And now he haunts the residents of Cabrini Green. I believe that's what it was. And yeah, the film really tries to tackle the sins of black history within the United States of America through the eyes of this, slasher, Candyman, and examine that. And I do agree with they talk about within the documentary. The one part that's weird to me is that he terrorizes the the residents of Cabrini Green, which is of basically the trying to think of a PC way term. Ghetto.
It's a black community.
But it's like really
poor.
Really poor, a lot of gang violence. And he's basically the urban legend there. And everyone knows like you don't look in the mirror and you don't say Candyman 3 times because he comes and he'll kill you. And I do agree that's something where it's like I don't think he would attack that community. If he's going to terrorize anyone, it's probably going to be, the rich community right across the tracks. So that I agree when they talk about that part was always weird. But other than that, it actually is a really good film. It's a really good horror film. You guys should watch it one day. Have you guys seen it? No? Don't say.
I mean, I've heard of it, but
the remake should have been out by now. I'm so mad. I was really excited for that one. So yeah, that's a really good one. Oh no, wait, no. Never mind. But 2000s, and I'm really glad that they touched on this. A lot of rappers started to pop up in horror films, and a lot of rappers used the iconography of horror films and such in their albums and their music. And by the 2000s there started to be this sort of crossover of sorts. And I like this because the first quote unquote violent film, like the first PG-13 film I ever saw, was Anaconda with Ice Cube. I remember that shit. So like when they brought that up, I was like, yes, that's true. And it like very, I think early 2000s.
I remember that movie from Video 2000.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's how do you think I saw it? A big ass snake. But they also bring up shit that I don't know if you guys have seen. I wish you guys would have seen. I showed it to Kyle, but he didn't like it that much, which really surprised me. We did a To the Table on it, which is Attack the Block with John Boyega, which is about, like a group of kids. I think it's like English type film. Aliens, these weird looking aliens land on their block, attack the block, and it's up to these kids to like defend their home turf, and it's a really good fun film. And that's where I saw John Boyega first. So when he got onto Star Wars, I was like, oh, the Attack the Block guy. And I was really excited.
Yeah, I remember that
because that was a good film. And then I really like the way this whole documentary leads up to the discussion on Get Out, and the way they talk about, like, first we were feared, and then we were basically servants, then we went from that to being a friend but not really a character, to more main characters, to now out and out something with Get Out, a black movie made by black people for black audiences. That also was very much enjoyed by white people. And I like how, I wish I would remember her name, but a certain individual within the documentary talks about how when she saw Get Out, that, while the main character was out there killing the white family, she saw white people in the audience empathizing with him greatly, and cheering in the same way that black audiences all this time, in order to enjoy horror, had to do with white characters. That it was finally, seeing that reverse, where white audiences could empathize with black characters in the same way black audiences have always had to empathize with white characters. And I thought that was just such a beautiful tail end. And I love the way it ended pretty much optimistically. Like, yeah, like I think Hollywood, you're going to see a lot of really great black horror, and it's really going to open the floodgates to stories that we always wish we could have seen, but never did. And now maybe we can.
Yeah.
Alexis?
Yeah.
Which one?
Flip a coin.
You go.
It really does heighten, even though I think, it was pretty apparent at the time, but what a big cultural moment Get Out was. And, we shouldn't forget this, but it very damn well near won Best Picture that year. Remember, it was a 3-way race between that, The Shape of Water, which won, and then also 3 Billboards, which I nuked on Twitter with my public endorsement.
That's true.
Yeah, because, the universe fucks with me, I fuck with it back in the only way that I can, it seems like. But, yeah. It just made me want to, the first thing it did, it made me want to go back and watch Get Out again, because I hadn't seen it in a long time. And it is a brilliant movie. From a crafts perspective and also from the horror perspective. But the cultural element was something that, aside from the very ending of it, which, because police brutality and everything we all are well aware of at this point, but a lot of those hidden cultural signs or just, I guess, I don't know if you call them Easter eggs, that are in the movie that I didn't really catch the first time I saw Get Out. It didn't even occur to me when somebody pointed out that when Daniel Kaluuya is strapped on the chair and he's pulling out the cotton out of it. Yeah. And it's like, well, I didn't catch that and what it meant. Or when he uses a buck to kill one of his captors, and this, like, a lot, the significance behind a lot of the stuff that's littered in there, or even like the sunken place, and how it's very intentionally designed to be like a projector, a movie projector, and you being pulled out of it, and what that's supposed to signify. Like, a lot of that I didn't really get when I watched the movie. So it made me feel stupid, first and foremost, for not already not understanding those things. But I think it also just, brings awareness of, well, a lot of people don't know that, and that it was there, and what a big moment it was, like, that Get Out was. And I think Jordan Peele also said that the ending of the movie, it was very much inspired from Night of the Living Dead back in '68.
I also like how they connected it kind of back to that as well. How, at the time, very nihilistic ending with a black lead, whereas with this, similar, where you think it was cathartic, like, okay, he survived, he's going to get away, and then, oh no, the rug's going to be pulled, but this time the rug wasn't pulled. He did get away.
And that was satisfying. It even made it more satisfying because I recall when I first watched Get Out and him like emerging victorious. And then you notice the cop car pulling up. I swear I was about to blow a gasket because, oh my God, they're not. And you know what was in a way sad is this is a movie where we've seen many horrid people doing despicable, horrific things. And the fact that may have been the scariest thing in all of this movie, that a cop car pulls up and then of course, in the circumstance of which Daniel Kaluuya is found, and like, you just know what's gonna happen. Like that was maybe the real, like maybe that was too real, if I'm being honest, to include in that. But of course, it like basically turning a trope on its head and making the journey much more satisfying, I think was powerful and made me love the movie much more. How was I believe we did a review of this film years back, Peter. Remind me, because you actually caught this in the theater. What was that moment like with a live audience?
It was great. I had a very active audience when watching this film, which it made it all the better. But no, like when those lights started to flash, right? Like the audience was like I could hear like, oh no, like you can the audience visibly like started to go like, oh fuck, here we go. Which by
like
the
your
way,
heart sinks.
That should tell you,
yeah,
that like all this
So
issues
much.
with like Black Lives Matter and all that, people know, like people and they know the way that police brutality specifically affects Black people in this country. They just, I don't know, they want to deny it, they're racist, they're assholes, but whatever. But the fact that so instinctively the audience just knows, like, oh no, that should tell you something. And I think at the very least, it really did get that point across, I believe. But then it came out hopeful, which I think is great. I love the fact of it was his friend Raj. I mean, we did, I think, did we do a couple reviews on this film? I don't remember.
We did. It's a big movie. And I think, as the documentary rightfully points to, a big cultural. I think just talking about this makes me want to do an audio commentary on that film, because there's a lot in it. And I it's been a long time. It's a surprising, thrilling movie. And as I mentioned, like, it won the Oscar for Jordan Peele. It got close. Imagine, I think, how much of a better standing we talked about earlier in this episode about the Academy trying to include more diverse films and awarding them, right? Imagine how much better they would look like if they had awarded Get Out Best Picture. I mean, talk about a 1 in a million shot.
A horror film?
For that. Right,
No,
a horror.
never.
That's also another thing. It's like, even though it didn't win Best Picture, it still won an Oscar. It was still invited to the table. A horror movie. You know? Like, wow. Yeah.
It's a good documentary.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah. There's a lot of things that you can take away
And
from it.
there's a lot of films that they bring up. I didn't mention any of them here that I've never seen. And they just throw out there like, this was a really good film from like 1970 some, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this, but now I really want to watch it. And I know eventually I'm gonna create a Black Noire or horror noir watch list, and I'm gonna go down and watch all the ones I haven't seen yet.
Right.
Because they sound really interesting, and I think that's another great thing about this, is it'll introduce you to some films you've probably never seen or never heard about. And
it's interesting. I wonder if not just with horror, but with with films that are important with the genre of Black horror. I wonder if, I don't know, since I'm speaking to the showrunner of To the Table, I wonder if that could provide a couple of themes down the line.
We'll see. October's coming up eventually.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. That'll be
so,
fun. Let's get through this Tron thing without you intentionally breaking me first.
Sure. Yeah. Are we done? Is that it? Was that? Yeah.
I don't know what you're waiting for. I said my.
Well, that was
like a shit ton.
No, I mean, you laid out what the ground that was covered, and it's pretty massive. And then on the same way that Alexis and I really felt about 13th, the similar themes across both of those documentaries is that as the decades go and as the generations come from the early 1900s to where we are right now, a lot of the racism is just replaced with new terms, new words. Right. It's just new. The story that's being told repeatedly is that if you're a black person in America, your life is just systematically unfair. More so. Even more so than your white counterpart. And that's the truth. That we still, in many ways, are fighting for people to just accept, much less even deal with from a systemic point of view. But that's next week, where we had somebody who had these, ideas and proposals, and of course was denied. So that's a wonderful tease for next week. Now, I mean, I loved watching this. It was very informative, very interesting, and I think it's one of those movies, documentaries especially, that I think it would be better serviced if more people watched it and saw it. Alexis?
No, yeah, I agree. It's interesting. It's just it's really cool, like, seeing everything and stuff, but at the same time, it's just like, it's a little depressing.
Yeah.
But I like that it ends, like, hopeful,
yeah.
I guess.
That's what I like about it, too, because I feel like a lot of the depressing shit we've been seeing recently, it's like, and that's why everything sucks.
Sucks.
All right, that's our time, But with this, it's like, it's been a long journey and shit has sucked, but yeah, we're on the precipice of some cool shit, And right. I agree, because there is a lot of cool shit coming out. They of course show, because at the time I don't think it was out yet, but they show little snippets of Us. Yeah, I couldn't get out of my head. I'm like, it's not Get Out. It's not Get Out. Us. Yeah. But then they do have the Candyman remake. I should have already seen, but shit happens. They have that one film. I know you've seen the trailer for it because they used to play it all the time. I don't know what the fuck they're gonna do with it now, but Antebellum. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just like snippets.
It was.
But yeah.
It looked interesting. I have no idea what the story is, but it seemed like modern day black women. I don't know if they go through like this time bubble back to like the antebellum South and slavery. That's what I kind of pieced together from the trailer, but I don't know what happened to it. But yeah, no, there's some good shit. And then of course other, not particularly black horror, but like we talked to with The Invisible Man, just dealing with more directly dealing with the social and political issues of our time. Yeah, there's also a lot of what's it called? Not racial or gender oriented, but class oriented horror. There's quite a bit of it. The one that pops to my mind, Ready or Not, which I really like that one. Yeah. That's a really good one. Yeah. It has a killer third act.
Oh wow.
But yeah, I don't know. In general, horror looks good, and especially I think black horror looks good in the coming future. Something to be hopeful for.
That's a nice change of pace. So yeah. If that's all, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Alexis, for being here. Wonderful show, and thank you all for listening. We have more podcasts with you every single week here under the spotlight. And until next time, bye-bye.